water. So Annika McGurk is the lead for that because we encourage NACD to apply. And so they've gotten 2 years of funding. So it's $1.2 million in a grant from the Forest Service. So we are having, Annika's hosting a meeting in person on that Sunday. And there's no cost to attend the Sunday meeting. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me or to Annika. I don't know if I can throw this in the chat, but I could, there's a 2-pager that Annika can share if anybody's interested in learning more. So I'll throw my contact information in the chat.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the meeting. We did the introductions on. Can we do the local work group minutes update, please?
Yeah, Jermaine, I'll need 1 minute just to pull up my notes. Also, just so everybody knows, so we're not doing just one local working group anymore. Southern and Eastern did their own. So I'm only able to speak to the Northern District Working Group. If anyone's here from those other districts, they may be able to speak to the other one. So our local working group was held in Cranston this year. It was held as a hybrid meeting using the NRCS OWL, which was really cool. And it was also held in English and Spanish with both in person and online interpretation. So we've been working with a lot of Spanish speaking producers, so we thought this would be a cool way to involve them. And they did come take advantage of that, particularly in person. We had a lot of Spanish speakers join and share their thoughts. So that was pretty cool. We had one Spanish speaker attempt to join virtually, but the feedback we got was that unfortunately the online Spanish interpretation did not work as well, just because they weren't hearing it that well. I don't know. Can people see it now? My notes?
Yep.
I'm sorry. With my current capacity, it wasn't possible to put together a PowerPoint. So I apologize, but we can still give you a general idea. So we had it in Cranston thinking we might get some urban producers as well as rural producers. We ended up getting many more urban producers, but some rural producers as well. But there was a lot of overlap actually in their concerns. We had 12 producers and 6 conservation professionals attend. The most commonly mentioned concerns were invasive species management. Now, this means different thing to a rural forest owner than it does to a urban person growing on a quarter of an acre who's concerned about bunnies and muskrats, you know. But that was a common thread, invasive species management. Lead in soil continues to be of concern to our urban growers. We know that there are some complications to NRCS addressing this. We have sought out other funding sources to address it. We've applied for a couple of grants and put in a request for an earmark from Senator Reed, which has made it to the stage of getting presented to the Appropriations Committee, which maybe everything does. I'm not sure that means a lot, but it's still possible. Access to and ease of information about NRCS, how it works, about other conservation programs available, how they work. I know Julie's made great strides on this, and we continue to support her in that work, but it continues to be something that producers are finding they need a little more of. Access to compost. Again, is something we've done some other grant-funded work on. Access to soil testing and understanding the results of the soil test. Something NRCS has done work on in the past, and as well as when that soil test is talking about lead or heavy metals, that might be under the purview of another funder. And of course, flooding and erosion. No surprise to anyone. Next year, we are going to plan in Northern's, it's a big county. We're going to have 2 meetings. We're going to do one in Providence and one in Scituate, and hopefully get a little bit more participation. I'm thinking of baiting people there with some non-federally funded food might be a good idea. And Dick and I will workshop some ideas to hopefully drive up our participation next year. Although I will say I was happy with the meeting. There was some good conversation going, and I was really happy that we were able to get some limited English proficiency producers to participate, which is a first time for Northern District. Dick, Julie, who was there, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it went well for how things were, to be honest with you. And I think we'll probably do better with the double meeting, the 2 meetings, I should say. But I'd like to ask everybody here to let your people know and let others know. And those of you who have contact with farmers or other producers, it doesn't have to be specifically a farmer, but those who produce in one way, shape, or form through or by agriculture, to let people know that these things will happen, and let us know if you have some good names, because the more people, the better. We want to know what's out there, what the problems are out there, and how we can work with it. So we'd appreciate everybody's help getting more people at the meetings. Thanks. That's it from me. Julie?
Good morning, everyone. No, I wanted to just say that Molly and Northern did a great job, including our LEP participants at the meeting. Excuse me. Sorry, allergies. And we were hoping that there would be a few more people. I think it was like maybe some weather issues that happened, and just a matter of trying to do our sort of joint virtual in-person meetings, and some logistical issues as well. Participants at our LWG meetings, I think having them separate for each of the different districts was a benefit. And we did bring in some new participants to the meeting, so that was great. Anyone else?
Ken Harris, I have a question. Did anybody on this call attend the other 2 meetings, district meetings, and any feedback? I'm also wondering if deer fencing popped up any place in the list of concerns.
Deer fencing pops up everywhere, Ken.
Yeah, understandably.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, everybody has a problem with deer fencing. I don't think there's anybody else on here from the other districts. Sarah, unfortunately, is in California with her mothers and who's in hospice, but I don't see anybody else, unfortunately. But they had good meetings, I know that. And I'm sure deer fencing popped up in their meetings too.
I know increased support for the sugar kelp practices, of which I am woefully uneducated myself, came up a lot at the Southern District meeting. And the Eastern District meeting, I don't have specifics on, other than I know it was well attended, better attended than ours, actually. Perhaps the benefit of being able to host at a winery.
Yeah, I attended the Southern meeting, and we had a fairly good turnout. That was held in Exeter at the Exeter Library in March. And we had a few members from the Woodpawcatuck River and watershed group, and a lot of what was discussed was flooding issues at that meeting.
Yeah, water usually comes up everywhere, both quality and quantity, and whether it's too much or too little. But yeah, it usually comes up everywhere.
Ben, you had a comment? Jay?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to go back to the comment about the sugar kelp in the southern meeting. Could you describe any specifics, what people were looking for? Or right now I'm working with a couple of fellows and we're trying to chase down things like best management practices for growing, as well as state regs on certifying crops and processing and whatnot. And we're really just trying to fill in the blanks and kind of harmonize the situation from the time seed lines go in the water to when people want to sell it. So I'd love to, and sidebar, please just reach out and we can chat outside this meeting. But I'd be really curious about what folks were talking about. Thank you.
I would definitely recommend reaching out to Gina Fuller from Southern District to get the update there. As I mentioned, I don't know anything about this practice. I just know when Gina told me how the meeting went, she said that was something folks were bringing up. But I'm sure she'd love to touch base with you. I don't think she's on the meeting yet. I know the workload for all three of us district managers is kind of reaching new heights lately. So I'm sure she would love to be here and had something come up, but I know she'd love to touch base.
Yeah, Gina's on the radio right now. She's got that radio show until 10 o'clock this morning, and then she'll be joining us after.
Oh, awesome. She's off being famous.
Matt, did you have anything? Matt Trace, I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I had to unmute. Molly, you referred to sugar kelp as a practice. Is that, you mean that it's a paid practice or what do we?
No clue. No clue.
I can
know
answer
nothing.
I can answer that question. Right now we have a CIG grant for 2 winters. We just finished the winter 1 crop, and then we basically have 3 growers, and we are developing the practice specs and kind of the economics around growing kelp to become an equip practice, or a proposed equip practice for review. So, while at the same time, it looks like Rhode Island is ramping up on production, clearly not at the rate of Maine or the Pacific Northwest. But this is definitely something on people's radar. So that's kind of where we're at.
Oh, great to hear. So the kelp is being grown as a conservation measure in existing aquaculture?
Exactly. Yeah. So kelp basically grows really well around here over the winter time. And people can apply for a modification to their existing aquaculture lease, or they can apply for new leases that are essentially temporary within state waters. So in areas that would be pretty much impossible to permit a lease during the busy boating season over the winter time, they're able to put out temporary gear, grow kelp, and then pull all that gear out. So it's essentially an October to May growing period, which is pretty ideal for underutilized waters. And the bay is fairly sheltered and rich in nutrients. So the idea is, is that they're taking out nutrients from the water, they're fixing a little bit of carbon, they're providing some temporary habitat. And so there's some pretty clear ecosystem benefits. So we have a series of sensors out on 3 different farms that are measuring things like dissolved oxygen and water temperature and salinity. And then I had the growers taking tissue samples and water samples as well to look at nutrient content, and potentially heavy metals, and other things that would be kind of unpalatable. For the most part, what we see is that the big producers are selling mostly to processors in Maine because we lack processing capacity in Rhode Island beyond sort of small scale kind of pickling and jarring. As far as I'm aware, we actually don't have any drying, which is a big one for kelp because you can drop the mass by about 90% in the volume that it takes up, and it becomes pretty shelf stable. So really, really happy to talk to anybody. I don't want to take up too much STT time here, but happy to chat on the side because this is something I'm having a lot of fun with, and I think it's an industry that has potential tremendous growth in the state. So, yeah.
Okay, next up we'll have Mike Wilkerson to give an update for engineering.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I think there's some people on here I haven't met yet, but my name is Mike Wilkinson, and I'm an engineer with NRCS. I work under Daryl, so I'm filling in for him today because he's on the road right now, driving back from a conference in Pennsylvania this week. But just a quick update on the EQIP side of things, with EQIP being our flagship conservation program. We have a lot of active projects addressing a range of resource concerns. I'll just list off a couple, including access roads, chemical handling facilities, water wells and pumps, irrigation for livestock, watering facilities, the typical planting and mulching, sprinklers, irrigation, reservoirs, and a lot. But we've also been, as of lately, trying to push and educate on our combustion system improvement practice through utilization of the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA money. And that allows us to upgrade inefficient engines, combustion engines, diesel, gasoline, etc., and replace them with an equivalently powered electric engine. And the goal of that being to reduce emissions. And not just engines, we have other efficiency related practices for buildings and greenhouses for heating and cooling and ventilation, and those type of practices, all helping to reduce energy use and make things more efficient. And all that is eligible for the IRA funds that we have. And then on the watershed side of things, we're definitely very active in engineering on the watershed side of things. With our EWP program, the Emergency Watershed Protection, that program is more of a short-term program in response to a disaster that has occurred, which in most of our cases is flooding, which we're all familiar with this past couple of years. And so we get reached out to by a sponsoring community, which is usually a municipality, and they request our assistance through our program to implement recovery measures, which could be repairing stream banks, removing debris from waterways, could be structural means of alleviating flooding like earthwork and walls. And we also have projects involving property purchasing, where we buy out the homes, demolish them, and return the property to natural floodplain conditions. So as of now, we have 5 active / approved EWP projects. The most notable one being in East Providence, which Gina DeMarco has been spearheading for the most part on the sponsor side of things. And that one is, we acquired 18 parcels in the city of East Providence, 13 homes and 5 lots. And where we're at in that project is all the property closings have occurred earlier this year, and those homes will actually be demolished, I think within the next few months, and then the restoration plan will begin from there. We have another active project. The construction just started beginning of last week, and this one is for a stream bank restoration project along the Woonasquatucket River on the Johnston-Providence line. And that was a result of a storm we had last year that caused some erosion on the stream bank. And so the design plans for that include some riprap and additional plantings just to stabilize the stream bank. And so again, yeah, construction has started on that this past week. So NRCS will be out there to make sure things are going smoothly. We have 5 more projects in the queue. A couple being another stream bank stabilization project in Providence along the Woonasquatucket River, near United Way on Valley Street. They had as a result of storms in March. There was some erosion that was affecting the stream bank immediately adjacent to the building structure, which poses a threat to the building if additional erosion were to occur. So we've been working on getting funding for that one, and that project will be moving forward in the next coming months. We have a debris removal project from the Pecasset River in Cranston. In that location, there was just a pile of debris, man-made trash, branches, trees, and everything in between that's kind of clogging up the river in that area, and in a way partially damming up that location, and it's causing the river flows to divert over the banks and affect the neighboring properties. So that's another one of ours that's in the queue at the moment. We have a few other DSRs, we call it, damage survey reports, that serve as our request for funding for a few other EWP projects tied to the storms that we had in January and March. And then, so that was all EWP stuff. And then moving on to the PL 566 program stuff, that's the program that looks at a watershed as a whole and can address a range of project purposes, but most of our active projects in this program are addressing flood prevention. And so we have 3 projects in the planning phase, including the Wood Pawcatuck project, which we are working with PAR Engineering on, and they have developed a full-scale hydraulic and hydrologic model of the watershed to go over areas that experience the most flooding and ways we can help mitigate that. And then the Pecasset River is also in the planning phase. And then we also have one on the Woonasquatucket River watershed, also in the planning phase. And then we have a handful of about 9 PIFers, which are essentially our feasibility reports for additional watershed projects. And this is the first step of that program's process. And so, yeah, we have 9 PIFers, which served as determining whether a specific watershed project was feasible to move forward or not. And so we're working on getting those moving forward and into the planning phase. And I think that's about it I have for engineering updates.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mike? Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, sorry, I thought you said Mike. I have a question in regard to those energy efficiency. I can't remember what they're called.
Yes.
You mentioned sort of heating and cooling equipment, sort of non-combustion equipment. My last information was to apply for those practices, a producer would need to have first a farm energy audit. Is that still the case? And do we have TSPs available to do those?
It's definitely a case-by-case basis where trying to work with our neighboring states, NRCS staff, to determine scenarios where we don't need a full-scale energy audit, especially for some of our, I mean, most things in Rhode Island are smaller scale, so especially for the smaller scale, say greenhouses, for example, there's only a few, or maybe even just one. A lot of times doing that full-scale audit seems a little bit excessive. So I'm not sure who we have available for TSPs to do the full audits, but I know that internally we are working to try to develop means where we don't necessarily need to do a full-scale audit, but it will usually be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Ruben.
Yeah, this is Jay. Sorry, my first name is Ruben. Mike, thanks for that update. Do you know if there's any room for our oyster growers to either get boat motors replaced with electric and or solar panel and battery systems to replace generators? They do a ton of processing basically out on their leases, and they burn a whole lot of fuel in the course of processing and just going back and forth to their docks at pretty slow speeds. So I'm just curious if you could comment on that or if there's any leeway within those IRA funds.
Yeah, I think I guess in the case of upgrading boat motors, it's not something that I've seen yet, but that's not to say it's not something that would be acceptable as part of that practice, because really the most important aspect of that practice is the reducing emissions. So if there's willingness to upgrade an engine motor that's burning diesel or gasoline, then I'd say that's certainly something we would at least consider and look into to be eligible. There's a whole slew of agricultural equipment that is eligible. And maybe off the top of my head, I don't know that I saw boats on there, but it just may not be something that had been considered yet either. I don't want to rule it out.
Great, thanks for that. I'll probably reach out on the side.
Okay.
Okay, Ken, I see your hand. Ken, I see your hand and you muted if you have a question.
I apologize. I pressed the wrong button there. Just a question as to whether NRCS coordinates with the Farm Energy Program of the Office of Energy Resources. They have a pretty robust program there. It was actually started by DEM, passed over to them. Fund 20 or so farm projects per year to promote renewables and energy efficiency projects. And typically projects have multiple funding sources. So it'd be, I don't know if there's a connection there, but if not, I'd be happy to make it.
Yeah, I'm not personally aware of that. What was the name of that program? I can just to write it down.
Yeah, you can just, it's easy to find it online, but it's the Farm Energy Program run by the Office of Energy Resources. If you go to their website, you'll find it. And it's a significant source of funding and you know, promoting energy efficiency projects on farms, renewable energy use on farms, et cetera. So a lot of times your funding might be able to combine with other pots of funding to make something work. Aquaculture is considered agriculture in the state and certainly applicable there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
And my understanding is the Farm Energy Program is currently interested in doing outreach, connecting with more producers. So it's a good moment to make that connection.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move right along. Next, we'll go ecological science since we're ahead of the scheduled break. Cassie,
Yeah, Jermaine, can you give me
yes, I can
give
hear
me
you.
a moment. Yeah, give me a moment. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to go after the break and pull it up. All right. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so Passion Spears here. Can you all hear me? Just want to make sure.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Yeah, so just an update for ecological sciences. I just wanted to give you a quick overview and highlight what's going on here with us. For us right now, as we stand, we've been working on a lot of different areas within our team, ecological science team. Just so you just so I name everybody that's on it, so in case you all not aware, we have Melissa Hayden, who is our state biologist. We have Eric Bachner, who is assisting, and he's a conservation planning specialist and watershed water quality. So he handles all the watershed planning that we do in the state. We also have Jim Tureen, who's a assistant state soil scientist. And right now we also have right now a detail going on with Naomi Andrews, who's assisting us with many of the HEL and wetland compliance work that we do. For this year, that the main things that we've been handling is making sure that we're supporting the field office and in the state, really with conservation practices and enhancements, just making sure that those are available and that implementation requirements are available for staff to be able to plan and install these practices effectively. Right now, we have applied in Rhode Island 1,676 conservation practices / enhancements. Of that 1,676, 38% were climate smart practices enhancements. So a good chunk is related to the IRA funding. And that equals to about 641 practices installed that are directly IRA climate smart practices. And then 126 of those were also enhancements through CSP. So just to get, that's just a base. So that covered about, let's see, we have that in acres, about 2,000, just over 2,000 acres were covered with climate smart conservation practices for this year. In regards to the IRA funding, was there a question from someone? All right, never mind. So in regards to IRA funding and climate, right now we've submitted the 643 oyster restoration as a climate smart practice, and which would mean that next fiscal year, there's a good chance, it looks like it's going to be accepted as an interim or a tentative practice. Basically, it's under review, but they're going to accept that. So that means good for us in Rhode Island, because a lot of our oyster work, our habitat restoration work surrounding oysters, will be allowed to use the IRA funding to install those practices. So that's what we're hoping for next year, and that's still waiting for that approval. But we've submitted it and we've gone through that process, so we're hoping that will happen soon, and we'll be able to use oyster restoration for next fiscal year. Then we're continuing ongoing with IRA funding with all the other practices. We're looking at new and innovative ways to use practices and to be able to plan practices that will meet the climate mitigation requirements. So that's still underway. We have some ideas, making sure that the primary practices and the supporting practices are planned. And that's something that we're ongoing with training and stuff for the field staff to be able to accomplish. That way it's a full system, even though the primary practice is addressing the climate, the secondary practice is something that's needed to support the primary. We just want to make sure that those supporting practices are planned so that we can get the most benefit for a conservation plan and for the client. We've also established a URI forestry agreement that helps of these practices. So it's a forestry and agriculture agreement. So that's also dealing with basically a URI as a partner to assist with training, as well as providing support and forest management plans, reviews, and basically other technical assistance that will help us deliver these programs and to basically maximize our ability to spend these IRA funds within Rhode Island. So we're looking, so that's a good partnership that we established and are continuing on into the future for a bit here. We're going to expand that into next year as well, adding some other deliverables onto that agreement. So other than that, workforce for us, just so you know that we will have 2 staff positions that have just been, that were posted and are filled, and they're coming in next month. And next month we should have a state archaeologist on board for NRCS, as well as a state agronomist. So those are going to fill in some areas and give some needed attention to those two disciplines. So that's gonna hopefully make so that our cultural resource obligations are being met, and that we're maintaining compliance, and then also just to be able to expand that work, and so that we can get it done more quickly and effectively within the state for archaeology and for cultural resources. As far as agronomy, that's going to really help us with our crops, crop science and cover crops on practice here in Rhode Island. So we want to make sure that we continue that and also enhance it and further do some more complex cover cropping systems, as well as looking into other supporting practices that will support soil health and improve soil health within the state. So we're going to have the agronomists working directly with farmers and really trying to sell some of these programs, and many of them which are tied to the IRA Climate Smart mitigating practices. So we want to make sure that is really being targeted, and we get good outreach from a discipline, a technical discipline that will be able to really explain it and get folks to adopt these types of practices. As well as that is our grazing. So that position will also have much involvement with grazing and grazing lands here in Rhode Island as well. Also, that position is also going to be a big help with our urban and small scale agriculture. So most of the practices within small scale agriculture is agronomic. So we really want to focus on soil health with small scale with this position. So that position is also going to be the lead on many of our urban and small scale farmers. And then we continue. We have pathways employees with summer interns. I know that our state biologist did some job training with some interns and did some site surveys with Small World Begonia this year. So, we maintain that. We're looking at potentially doing more in the future too. Potentially next year having some additional disciplines with in ecological sciences with interns. So we want to give those opportunities for folks. And then we have a new practices, again, related to oysters. We have a bivalve aquaculture gear and biofouling control practice that we introduced this year. This is a good one because it gives the same opportunity to participants in EQIP. For all oyster growers now have the same opportunity in EQIP as opposed to restoration work where they're only available to specific area in each year. Now all oyster growers, no matter if they're doing restoration, can apply for this practice and do gear cycling. So that is one that is helpful for oyster growers at large. We adopted a new interim practice, raised beds, 812 for fiscal year 24. So that's an opportunity for, again, small farmers and urban growers to be able to install raised beds in certain scenarios. So that's a good one. There's no standard for height, I believe. I think you can make it as any high as you want. And sorry, hold on. Yep. So there's no condition on height, I believe. I have to re-look at the practice standard, but we just carried up that implementation requirements for that practice. So we're looking at getting that more participation in that practice as well. We're looking at a few other interim practices that will maybe coming on board in fiscal year 2025 as well. So I'll keep you posted on those, but we may have more additional practices. I know there's some soil amendment with lime practices that I think has potential here in Rhode Island, as well as low tunnels, and so there's a few other opportunities that we're gonna work towards getting adopted here in Rhode Island. Just recently, with help with Julie, did establish pollinator gardens fact sheet, and our biologist helped out with that project. So that's going to be, I don't want to talk too much, Julie, on that unless you want to share on that, but we're going to have that available, so that will provide outreach to a broader audience dealing with wildlife habitat and through pollinator gardens. Again, that will support urban landowners as well, and folks with limited space, they'll be able to be adopted to basically all scales and sizes of farms. So, and that's pretty much, that was it. For partnerships, we've done a lot with Save the Bay. We had some presentations done with them. We've continued to expand partnerships. So if there's anyone folks here that think there's a partner that we should work with, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll definitely align our missions together. So, we provide letter of support for several different partners who are looking for funding for habitat projects. We're continued involved with Envirothon. We have many of our team members involved as judges, and so we continue with that work. Audubon Society, we work with them, various projects. And I think we even I worked on the food briefs that just recently came out for the statewide food strategy. So we're always looking for opportunities to partner. So if folks have people in mind or feel like we can expand our partnerships we currently have with you, let me know. All right. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, this is Dick Cashes. Excuse me. I'm hoping as you're putting in new things with urban, whether they be practices or policies or anything else, that you are contacting the districts, since all 3 districts have people working on urban, whether in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of confusion out there in the urban world and the small farm world about what NRCS can do and all that kind of thing. I know Julie's been working with us, but the rest of you guys need to know too, that if there's things going on, especially if there's training that needs to happen on new practices and stuff, that you're letting us know so that we can get our urban people up to speed so they can be talking to their urban farmers to get the things that they should be getting. Just a point. Thanks.
No, that's absolutely a great point, Dick. And so I think with this, a new agronomist position coming on, we're going to have someone dedicated to, first of all, looking at the practices we already offer and making them available and scaled, so that scaled appropriately and implemented appropriately for urban growers. So that's the person we have coming in has experience in that. So we're going to really build up those efforts, and so that there's no confusion with our urban growers and what NRCS can do and how we can support. So that's the goal in the next few months here, is to start those connections and make sure the districts are the partner in that effort. So
Great. You should send that person around to the district so they can make contact and talk to our people.
They will definitely do that. Yep.
And I see your hand up.
Hello. I rarely do this, but I will agree with Dick on the fact that there's been a lot of questions from urban and small scale producers about the newly adopted practices. I would, that's something that I've been fielding those questions for about a year and a half now, or maybe more, as new practices are announced or we start to learn about them. Folks have questions around things like fencing in urban settings. There's been sort of a yes and no answer on that question. Access control, fencing, exclosures, et cetera. People are interested in whether those can be funded in any way. The soil lead question, I know that there was some excitement around that a while back, that maybe NRCS would be able to fund some soil lead mitigation, or at least testing. And I think there's a lot of folks that are hoping that will come back around, that conversation. Trying to remember what else. I think there's some confusion around the practices might be listed but are not available. Like you mentioned low tunnels, that's one of them. It would be really helpful to be confident on what is ready for prime time and what is not, so that we don't make false offers of assistance, that turn out not to be things that are available. And then one more thing is on engineered practices in urban and small scale. I think there's some new things like the composting systems that require design, and I think it would be good for producers to know like what that will entail if they sign up for that, how long that will take to design, and if there's any ways we can streamline those designs so that they don't necessarily have to go through a year or 2 years of engineering for a small compost bin system. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's good stuff, Matt. Definitely, I hear you, and we'll address those things.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk.
Judah, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I had just put actually a message in the chat that I can share my screen to show folks the publications that Cassius was referring to. The first thing is that we've translated our urban small farms practice fact sheet to Spanish for our Spanish speaking clientele. And so that is available in addition to the English version of that fact sheet. And then just to let you all know, this is what we're looking at is a pollinator gardens design guide. And that's also going to have a companion sign, pollinator garden habitat sign, that's going to be available with that. Our state biologist, Melissa Hayden, had developed these 3 different types of designs depending on the moisture status of the soils, and then a really simple design for urban patios or backyards, or I should say balconies or something like that. So this is what we're just finalizing right now, a localized version of the pollinator garden design fact sheet. That should be available hopefully by September. And then once we have the English version, we will again be translating this to Spanish.
That looks great.
I see you had your hand up, Karen.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to Cassius. I really appreciated all those updates. I couldn't write it down fast enough, but I wanted to follow up on something I'd mentioned earlier. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kyra Jacobs from EPA Region 1. I'm the Source Water Protection Coordinator, and I've been working with NRCS for about 15 years in all 6 states. And I'll have to probably jump off before the partner updates. So I just wanted to mention, as it relates to what you talked about with forestry, Cassius, that we have been working with NACD, myself, and the Forest Service. Some of you know Carl Honkinen. Like me, he works with all 6 New England states. And we had come up with this idea of a Northeast Mid-Atlantic Forest and Water Partnership about 4 years ago, and finally was able to encourage NECD to apply for funding. So at this point, NECD, under the leadership of Annika McGurk, has $1.2 million in grant funding from the Forest Service to implement a landscape scale restoration grant, 2 years worth so far. And it's my understanding that NACD will be applying for the next round of LSR Forest Service funding. So what that means for Rhode Island is that 2 things. One, we'd really like to see more New England states get involved. The first 2 states were Connecticut and Ohio. It's 13 states total. And then in the next round, it's Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And then this year, I'm not sure which states will that NACD will be looking to for on the ground projects, but what the Forest Service wants is on the ground implementation projects, and they can provide additional funding. But this is a very successful partnership that's existed in the Southeast from Texas to Virginia for the past 13 years. So we really wanted to get some energy around it for our own region. And it almost mirrors the Northeast region of NACD. So the second thing is that we'll be hosting, EPA will be paying for a workshop in Connecticut in, it looks like we just nailed down our dates, November 20th and 21st. And that will be free to attend, and it'll be in the New Haven area at one of the water utilities. So we're going to be kicking off the partnership in person, or follow up to a meeting we did in New Jersey last year that most New England folks couldn't attend. So I could put some more information in the chat. NACD is, and their contractor, Cadmus, is just about to get the website up and running, but we do have a 2-pager that I could send to everyone on this list if that's helpful. And I'll just make a note in here. So I just want to say, Cassius, would love to talk about what you're doing with URI, and if you can connect with Annika McGurk, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, let's definitely talk more on that. And
If
I
there's
and
no
I
more,
and I just realized I didn't share my presentation with you, so I'll just put that in the chat. I forgot to put share, so I'll put that in the chat. So if you needed to take notes on anything I said, it should be all there in my presentation.
if there's no more questions for Cassius, we'll resume. We'll take a break and come back at 10:40, please. Um, I hope everyone's back. Next, we have a update from the program staff.
Brittany, do you want to go ahead and share your screen? Wait.
Okay, I'm back. I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay. So I'll just introduce myself because I haven't met some of you, but some of you I have met. But now I may have a different position. So I am the new Financial Assistance Program Manager for EQIP, CSP, and AMA. Rudy, you're sharing your chat screen.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Bruni, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'll be presenting on the the EQIP, CSP, and AMA portion of this presentation, along with some climate smart activities. So under the Farm Bill programs, we have EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program, AMA, Agricultural Assistance Management Program, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. So producers can apply for all of these financial programs, as well as qualify for various ranking pools within each of these programs. Next slide, Bruni. So for fiscal year 2024, these are our allocations by program. So for EQIP, we had 3.8 million. For AMA, we had 126,000. And then for our CSP program, we had 1.2 million. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Bruni. So here are our fiscal year 2024 obligations to date. So we're still in the process of obligating contracts. So this is what we have. These are real-time numbers right now. So for EQIP, we've obligated 3 million. We have 164 contracts and we received 211 applications. For AMA, we obligated $112,000. We have 10 contracts and we received 43 applications. And then for CSP, we obligated $107,000 with 23 contracts and 49 applications received. And we're still, again, in the process of pre-approvals and obligations. So these numbers will increase over time. So next slide, Bruni, please. So that was the Farm Bill General EQIP. So now we'll talk about the IRA Inflation Reduction Act. So it was signed into law by President Biden in August 2022. IRA provided NRCS with additional funds for its existing conservation programs in 2024. So 5.5 million environmental quality incentive program, or $5.5 million was given to EQIP, and then $517,000 in IRA funds was given to CSP. So national headquarters will hold signups for RCPP and Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, Wetland Reserve Easements, ASEP-WRE, and Agricultural Lands Easement Program. The IRA does not create any new programs. It gives NRCS additional funds to expand its existing climate efforts and satisfy unmet demand. IRA funds began in fiscal year 2023. All IRA funds must be spent by September 30th, 2031. Excuse me. Go ahead, Bruni. You can go to the next slide. So we'll talk about the allocations that Rhode Island got for fiscal year 2024. So for EQIP, we got 1.6 million. And then CSP, we have 517,000. Our original allocation was around 5 million, but we were unable to spend the full allocation and had to return funds. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Bruni. So our obligations to date for IRA are $847,000 for equip, with 98 applications received, and 65 of those are contracted already. And then for CSP, $380,000 in obligations, with 32 applications received, and then 23 of those are contracted right now. And again, these numbers will increase over time. This is just obligations to date. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Bruni. So NRCS has climate smart agricultural practices, and those are eligible for those IRA funds. And in this PowerPoint that I think we're going to share with you, if you click on the first link, it will bring you to the whole list of IRA eligible practices that NRCS offers. Their mitigation activities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve carbon storage. NRCS is continuously evaluating mitigation activities and will update them as appropriate. NRCS has many other conservation practices that can be used to address resource concerns on the farm, and those can be found on the field office technical guide, that is in the link provided in the underlined wording. Next slide, Bruni. I apologize for coughing. I am getting over a little sickness, so just bear with me. So some of the climate smart practices that NRCS offers, we're going to show you in the next few slides. So a very popular one that everybody likes to do is tree and shrub planting, cover cropping, and then we have minimal tillage, no-till planting. Mulching is another really popular practice in Rhode Island that's eligible for IRA funding. Next slide, Bruni. And then we have composted bedded pack. We have riparian buffer, grassed waterway, windbreaks, and hedgerows, another really popular practice. Composting facilities. Next slide, Bruni. And those all address water quality, sorry. I should have said that. And then these also address water quantity. So we have irrigation practices, so like irrigation pipeline systems and renewable sources, which are used to reduce energy usage on the farm. Next slide, Bruni. So climate smart practices for energy efficiency. So we have an efficient evaporator. We have greenhouse screens and insulation. And then a practice that we were pushing out this year is the Combustion System Improvement 372, which replaces high emitting equipment with electric equipment. So for greenhouses, we have roof vent, heating, ventilation fans. I think Mike touched on this stuff, but I can just touch on it again. Greenhouse screens, the insulation, LED lighting. For farmsteads, we have scroll compressors, motor upgrade, hot water heaters, ventilation fans, LED lighting again. And then that efficient evaporator is for maple syrup operations. And we also have SAP preheaters and reverse osmosis for the maple syrup operations. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Bruni. So climate smart practices for plant and animal health. A couple here are silvopasture, and then a really popular one in Rhode Island for our livestock producers is rotational grazing. So producers who implement conservation practices for managing grazing on pasture and rangelands may improve livestock forage while sequestering carbon in perennial biomass and soils and reducing net emissions on pasture and rangelands. So another climate smart practice that is eligible for IRA funding is brush management. And that can be used to remove woody invasive vegetation through mechanical treatment to maintain or enhance native perennial grass and forb communities. So on the other slide, Bruni, I'm just reading some of the notes, sorry. And then another form of invasive treatment is the herbaceous weed treatment, where we're removing herbaceous weeds to release desired deep-rooted perennial species. And then one more practice that's really popular, that's IRA eligible and addresses plant and animal health, in Rhode Island is pasture and hayland planting, but we don't have a picture of that. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Bruni, please. So these are IRA eligible practices that address forest health and agroforestry. So we have forest stand improvement, super popular in Rhode Island for our forest landowners. Probably one of the most popular IRA practices this year. Forest farming, wildlife habitat planting, which is gaining traction in Rhode Island. A lot of interested producers for that practice, and alley cropping. Okay, we can go to the next slide and we'll start talking about small scale conservation practice scenarios, which I think is what Matt had touched on, like those urban practices for the smaller scale farms. So we have adjusted payment rates for these conservation practices. That way they can better serve small scale operations. And many of these small scale practices are actually climate smart and forestry practices, which are eligible for that IRA funding. Okay, you can, let me do the note actually. So the payments are made on smaller units that fit small scale farming situations. So an example would be cover cropping, which is paid by the square foot instead of the acre. Next slide, Bruni, please. So we have some examples of these small scale practices. So we have a high tunnel in the picture to the left. From the top picture to the right, we have mulching, and we have the low tunnel. And then we have the raised beds below. Some of the conservation practices or conservation related actions that NRCS commonly helps landowners and managers within Rhode Island include practices to help your land's soil health. And so that you can see those in that, or those are basically examples in the pictures there. Okay, next slide, Bruni. Just some more small scale practices. So we have rain garden, stormwater management, and pollinator planting all in one picture there to the left. And to the right, we have soil health practices. Maybe cover cropping happened on that land, or maybe doing a soil test to figure out how we can improve the health of the soil. Although the soil test is not an IRA eligible practice, but cover cropping is. And then in the picture below, we have a windbreak or a hedgerow. Next slide, Bruni. All right, so this practice that we were pushing out for this year, combustion system improvement 372. So that is replacing existing diesel tractors with electric alternatives, and that can be funded through our IRA. So that's replacing other high emitting diesel mobile on-farm equipment like loaders, forklifts, irrigation pumps, motor graders, and backhoes with electric alternatives. But also under this practice, you can replace high emitting diesel tractors with lower emitting diesel tractors, although that will be funded through the regular Farm Bill equip and not be eligible for IRA because it is not going from diesel to electric. And I believe that is my last slide.
Thank you, Annie. Just to clarify, because I think Julie told me that this was asked previously, we can exchange other equipment. We're not limited just to tractors. There are different equipment that if determined to be going for a more efficient system, especially if they're going to electric, can be replaced using this funding. However, we cannot replace motors in a boat. There is requirement and language that prohibit us from doing things that are not, I guess, tied to the floor. So that motor engines is not currently an opportunity, and this was confirmed when IRA came out. However, any equipment other than motors for a boat is likely possible. Okay. So Annie, Annie started, I was just coming back and I wanted to introduce Annie and I also want to introduce Marina. So if we can take a few seconds, Marina, before you jump into your slides and introduce yourself to the group. And Annie, thank you so much for jumping in. Can you tell them just briefly a little bit about your background, you know, kind of like your bio a little bit, and if you are decent, turn the camera on so they can see it. And the same with Marina,
my
if you
gosh.
can.
Yeah.
If you can, if it's not possible, that's okay, because I dropped this on you. Marina,
No,
you
it's
too,
okay.
if you can turn the camera on and just say who you are so that they have a face with a name.
Yeah. Marina, I'll go first so that way you can introduce yourself like before you present. I am going to turn my camera on. Again, I have been sick for this week, so my hair may be a little bit messed up. I don't know. Oh God, and the lighting is weird. I think some of you may know me though. Like I know JA, I know Dick, I know a bunch of you on here, but if you don't know what I look like, this is what I look like. I'm gonna turn my camera off now though. And so I got my master's in environmental science and management from URI, and I was really focused in watersheds and hydrology. I did my master's on the Pawcatuck River and the dam removals that were occurring on that river. And then I worked for the Northern Rhode Island Conservation Districts for about 2 years as a environmental technician, so worked pretty closely with NRCS. And then I transitioned into a soil conservationist at NRCS for a couple years. And I got to know a lot of the urban farmers, as Matt can probably attest to, and a lot of, you know, big forestry owners up in Northern Rhode Island. So it was like a pretty wide range of things happening in Northern that I was exposed to. And I got pretty comfortable in that position. I really enjoyed it, but then an opportunity opened up in programs here at NRCS Rhode Island, and I couldn't really pass up the opportunity to broaden my horizons and learn something new. I felt like I had done everything I could as a soil con, and it was time to step up a little bit. So here I am, trying to learn as fast as possible. So yeah, it's great to meet you all, and I look forward to working with you guys in the future and partnering on various different things, different projects.
Thank you, Annie. We're lucky to have you. Ken, you have a question? I want to acknowledge that you have your hand up.
Thank you. First of all, great to see all the good work happening, and my compliments for that. It's all helpful to the state meeting its climate goals. Annie, you made a comment about funds being returned. I just want to ask about that. Is there only one crack at the apple here? That $5 million allocation, if it wasn't allocated this year, does it go back and not come back to Rhode Island? And how much did get returned?
Annie, can I take that? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So Ken, the issue with the IRA allocation is that it has very specific language that limits where we can use the allocation. So what the strategy that we used this year is we made every possible IRA eligible application practice available to the state. So we didn't limit practices. So if any practice was IRA eligible, we grabbed it with IRA first to try to do our best to utilize the funding as much as possible. However, we didn't get a lot of people interested in things that will take or consume a lot of the funds. We didn't get anybody interested in the type of composting facility that they limit us to, or we didn't have anybody really interested, maybe one person, to go to the electric. We had tons of interest for people to go diesel to diesel, but a lot of concerns and hesitation with people changing to electric. And so if we can either receive more flexibility in the language, not to limit the eligibility to certain practice narratives, or we get more interest in those larger practices, we should have better luck spending the money next year. We return, it was 5 million, we kept 1 point something, so we return a lot of money. And another thing that we have a lot of interest, Ken, that maybe this is something we can work with you, is we have a lot of interest in doing energy work with nurseries. Connecticut was very successful in spending a significant amount of IRA funding on nursery doing energy work. And that's something too that we just didn't have interest at this point. So there's a lot of opportunities for next year. I think we just didn't have the time to get to turn those people into applicants that were willing to move forward. Matt? You have your hands up, Matt Tracy?
I think you
so
might be
sorry.
muted.
It's so hard to find the mute button on this. Sorry. You were talking about the energy practices, and that goes back to what I was asking about audits. When I was looking to do energy efficiency in our nursery operations, there was a requirement that we have an agricultural energy assessment, which we were lucky enough to have contracted back in 2016. So for my organization, it wouldn't be a lot of trouble, wouldn't be as much trouble. But if someone doesn't already have one of those assessments, it sounded at the time like those energy practices would be unavailable until the assessment is completed. And that could take a year. And I looked into TSPs, and that seemed like those would be hard to find to do the assessments. So I feel like that's a roadblock to this energy money. So maybe a problem to solve in the near future.
Yeah, so I think, Matthew, it depends on the type of interest that there is. So the complexity of the request. I believe that there are certain things that we can do within state that will not require us to have an audit, that are replacements and things of that nature that are much simpler than perhaps insulation or other things that may require more data to show the efficiency. So I do believe Michael Wilkinson, he attended a training in Connecticut just because we wanted to make sure that we don't put barriers that are not required. Connecticut and Massachusetts have procedures for which internally, without performing audits, they have accomplished allowing certain practices and documenting the burden that they ask us to document without necessarily performing an audit. My ask to the engineering staff and leadership and others has been to not put barriers when not necessary. So if we can communicate clearly to the field staff when an audit is required versus when it's not, then have that transparency there. That definitely for more complex, larger projects, there might be a benefit to have that audit in place. But there's a lot of things that is just replacing things. So anytime that you're replacing, I would say an equipment, possibly to a variable rate equipment and things like that, perhaps the audit might not be necessary. Does that help?
That helps a lot. Thank you. Yeah, simple direct replacements should be straightforward. It sounds like. Great.
And I didn't get a chance to introduce myself because this is why we hire Annie, because she goes for it. I'm sorry, Annie. And I was trying to be like, oh wait, and so I showed my shot, and I apologize for that. So my name is Bruno Develes. I'm the assistant state conservationist for programs, and I oversee all of the programs, and I've met many of you, and we're growing our programs team, and I'm very excited. We're actually bringing one more person to help us with stewardships that should be here in September. So we're very excited about that. And so opportunities like IRA, RCPP, and others have allowed us to retain more technical assistance dollars and therefore allow us to do recruitment. So Ken, we don't want to send any money back. And so any help that we can get from you all facilitating connections or partnerships to reach to those customers that perhaps don't know that these opportunities are there, especially for those simple transfers, especially for tractor conversions and electric and things like that, like equipment swaps. Definitely please help us reach those groups. And so next, Marina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marina Gaprara. I believe I have met the majority of you, but if I have not, then I look forward to it. I was hired in January on the program staff. My role is focused on Conservation Innovation Grant, CIG, and Regional Conservation Partnership Program, also known as RCPP. The focus of my role is very partnership oriented. The two programs I just mentioned are very involved with many institutions in Rhode Island. They are opportunities for individuals, farmers, nonprofits, government entities to obtain funds through NRCS to do new and exciting programs. So if I haven't met you, I hope to, and I hope to discuss your ideas and the potential for CIG or RCPP to fund new conservation initiatives in Rhode Island. So that brings me to my slide on CIG. Rhode Island was initially projected to offer $275,000 in grant opportunities to fund climate smart projects, and that was coming from 5% of Rhode Island's EQIP IRA allocation. However, as the news has reported, there was a court injunction that halted the USDA's use of certain terminology, and that terminology was included in the notice of funding opportunity that we were using for CIG. So unfortunately, the CIG opportunity for fiscal year 2024 has been canceled, and that language that the USDA utilizes in the NFO, everything is put on pause until the new fiscal year 2025, which begins in October. So that money that we were initially going to utilize for CIG, we had to send back in our big IRA return of funds. Next slide, please, Bruni. We also just wanted to showcase one of the RCPP projects that has been very successful and is ongoing in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Forest Health Works project. Many agencies, some of whom are represented here, are partners on this project, including DEM, the Northern District, the Rhode Island Land Trust Council, the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. I believe there's 13 partners on this project, and this is a program to bring forest easements into Rhode Island because there's not a program inherently in NRCS's options for forest easements on a yearly basis. So we had two application periods, one in fiscal year 2023 and one in fiscal year 2024. And we have two options under this program. The first being US held easements, where the applicant, the landowner, applies directly to NRCS to have NRCS hold the easement. And for that application period, those two application periods we ran, we got 30 applications. And amongst those applications, the forest easement areas that were being proposed totaled 1,727 acres. And thus far, we have pre-selected 7 of those US held easement applications totaling 373 acres. And then on the entity held easement side, this is where land trusts apply on behalf of landowners to partner with NRCS. And the entity, typically a local land trust, holds the conservation easement over the forest land. And in that option, we have 7 applications, and that came from 5 different land trusts. And those applications are totaling 168 acres. And we have thus far pre-selected 2 of those applications totaling 105 acres. This is a really big success in Rhode Island. We typically don't have this many applications for easement programs, so it really speaks to the need and the desire for forest-specific easement programs in our state. And we hope to meet our acreage goals and our funds obligation goals to request more funds so that we can preserve more forest land in Rhode Island. And I believe that's my last slide. Thank you. I hope to connect with you guys soon.
Thank you, Marina. And next, we're gonna have Joe. Joe, if you can turn your camera, just introduce yourself for the ones that don't know you, and then let me know when to hit next.
How's that? I'm unmuted now. Hi, I'm Joe Bashan. I'm on the program staff. I think I know everyone. And I do a lot of easement work, and I do some other things for the program staff. So thank you. I'm going to talk about our Rhode Island easements, our obligations this year, and some of the closings we completed. So if you go to the next slide, that would be great. So the FY 2024 easement allocation by program for the agricultural lands easement program, we were given $622,400, and for the wetland reserve easement program, $338,000. The original allocation for ALE was $556,000, but we requested additional funds because one of our prior year contracts had their appraisal completed and the price of the appraisal went up. So we had to add just about $200,000 to our share of the easement contract. Next slide, Bruni. In FY 2024 easement closings, we had an RCPP that Marina worked on with a bunch of partners. That was from 2014, called the RCPP Health, and it was using Healthy Forest Reserve Funds, which was a program through NRCS. The old RCPPs are different than the new ones in that they had to use existing program rules. And through this program, we were given a sum of money, and we did select 3 easements to go forward to closing and to protect those properties. And we completed the first easement a few years ago, but this year we closed on the final 2. It was 132.9 acres. The NRCS cost was $329,831. And these are US held easements, so we pay the whole cost of the easement value. There were 2 US held easements, and they were both in Forest, Rhode Island. So this completes our RCPP 14 Healthy Forest Reserve easements for the Southern New England Heritage Forest. So that project is now done. Next slide, Bruni. So we're very happy. Marina and I spent a lot of time. So this is one of the easements. We don't really give out like the landowner's name and stuff, but this is the one that's 36.02 acres, Central Pike and Foster. It's an interesting easement because of all the streams that go through it. But yes, we closed on that in 2000, I think in last December. Next slide, please. And the second one we closed, which was just not too many weeks ago, and this took us a long time to do because there were certain complications. And this is 96.9 acres of forest land, and this is located in off of Foster Center Road, right near Foster Center. And once again, this is a beautiful easement, and we closed it, and we're happy we got this done. And then FY 24 easement closings for the agricultural land easements. We did one easement that was 20.4 acres, and that was with the Rhode Island Agricultural Lands Preservation Commission, who's one of our biggest partners. We do most of our easements. The NRCS cost on this, once again, these are entity held, so NRCS will pay 50% of the easement value. That's the most we'll pay. There are some exceptions, and it's one easement located in Warren, Rhode Island. And this is a picture, it's right on the Palmer River. It's a beautiful easement, and we're happy we protected it because just about one lot over is one of our wetland reserve easements that we've protected and that we're doing restoration on right now. So we're trying to build a sort of an area of these easements along the Palmer River. Next slide, Bruni. And then we're currently working on 3 different WRE restorations, and these are coastal salt marshes. And what we're trying to do with these is we are trying to, because of sea level rise, the marshes are being, they're losing the types of wetland features that we want to have. They've become degraded. So the wildlife that we're looking at are mainly salt marsh sparrows and diamondback terrapins, which is a turtle. And so what we're doing is we're working with Save the Bay. And this photo shows restoration of runnels, and also spoils from the runnels were used to create islands for birds that utilize coastal marshes. So those will be nesting islands. And the reason we're putting in the runnels is because with sea level rise, the water gets on the marsh, floods the high marsh, which is Spartina patens, and kills the marsh. And that Spartina patens is where these salt marsh sparrows build their nest and lay their eggs. So if we can put the runnels in, instead of the water sitting on the marsh after the higher tides go out, it goes back into the bay. Next slide. So this is Rocky Hill School where we're doing this. This is another picture of Rocky Hill School, and some other things we're doing because there are diamondback terrapins is we're creating turtle nesting habitat for those terrapins. So we go in and we bring in really sandy soils. We bring them in with dump trucks, and then we spread the soils, and those will be areas where the diamondback terrapins can come up out of Narragansett Bay and lay their eggs. Next slide, please. And here's our NRCS easement portfolio. Those are the number of easements we have for each program and our total acres, which is now 4,251 acres. And we'll be adding significantly to that with Marina's RCPP programs and some other work we're going to be doing over the next number of years. I think that's my last slide.
Yeah, and I think the most important part of this slide, though, is that 80% of these easements are accomplished with partners. So if we were to rely only on ASAP WRE, we wouldn't be able to protect this much land. So we have a lot of the partnership programs like RCPP, FFRP, and ASAP ALE that are partner driven, and we work with partners to accomplish it. So that's huge. So thank you so much. And that concludes our presentation. And we're ready if you have any questions.
Next up, if there's no more questions for programs, we'll have partner updates. It doesn't matter who goes first.
I'll start the ball rolling from DEM. We are pleased to see that the farmland preservation and money for forestry protection and management is on the green bond to be voted on by the public in November. 5 million for farmland, 5 million for forestry, which will continue important activities and maintain our ability to be a partner. Without the, as Bruni and others, Joe had said, it's 50% of the money typically comes from NRCS and the other has to come from someplace. It's often the state or DEM. So we're thankful that our coffers are going to be filled and enables us to be a partner on all this. And there'll be various activities ramping up in the state to promote the green bond. So that's going to be a focus of our activity. A lot of our money from the last green bond, forestry related, is is hitting the ground, particularly by the end of August. Almost all the money that was allocated to DM will be working. It's not going to be spent. A lot of hazardous tree removal. We plan to do a forestry management plan for all the property that DM owns, some 60,000 acres of forest land. That's never been done before. We'll identify habitats and determine how best to manage them. In many cases, they may simply be left alone. In other cases where more active forest management is needed, we'll do so. There's a lot of degraded forests in Rhode Island due to disease and insects. But this pot of money gives us the ability to address those issues and probably, hope for a better future for the forest health of the state. So I'll leave it as that in terms of an update for DEM.
I can chime in here for fisheries if that's all right. I'll take that as a yes. It was really, really interesting to see the numbers for EQIP and especially EQIP oysters. We continue to expand that program. I don't have the total number of contracts, but we're looking at something like 35 to 40 continuing contracts. A lot of those EQIPs oyster contracts are on a 4-year rotating schedule. We also continue, like I was chatting about earlier in the meeting, to make progress with our CIG kelp. Ken, it was just on the phone this morning with Ananda in your office. We're really looking at breaking down the barriers to entry to kelp growing, processing, and bringing that product to market, which is a really interesting problem. And I think we're right on the forefront of that. So with the support from NRCS, we're in really good shape, and things are getting interesting. We also continue to make progress with the statewide shellfish restoration and enhancement plan, which necessarily will open up new opportunities for oyster restoration. Alongside that, we're looking at the introduction of other species, not only kelp, but species such as eelgrass and scallops, along with soft-shelled clams for additional restoration opportunities moving forward. So in terms of fisheries and DEM, our relationship with NRCS continues to grow and frankly diversify, and we are really excited about what's coming up. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Carol?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Jermaine. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for a really great and informative meeting. And for those who weren't on earlier, I just wanted to emphasize 2 things. One, our Northeast Mid-Atlantic Forest and Water Partnership, which is really kicking into high gear. And I put some notes in the chat about that. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. I put my contact information in the chat a couple times. Again, it's Kyra Jacobs. I'm the EPA Region 1 Source Water Protection Coordinator. So I work with all 6 states on drinking water protection. And I also have been working really hard on the planning for the NACD meeting, because I'm the only one out of, I think, the 220 people who are attending who actually lives in Boston. So looking forward to that. And I did reach out to NACD, and I know there were some questions earlier about the hotel room. Sounds like if you have a question, please contact Carla at NACD directly if you'd like to attend. Again, for those of you who it's not on your radar, it's August 9th. It starts for, I think, leadership, for NACD leadership, and then it runs through Tuesday, the tours through August 13th. And then I think there's a National Conservation Partnership Program meeting on the Wednesday, the 13th. And it's being held in downtown Boston in the Seaport. And it's an easy train ride from Rhode Island if you don't want to drive. And let's see, the other thing I had mentioned was on that Sunday, I know it's not convenient, a Sunday in August, but it has to do with the NACD match. There is a free meeting. You do not have to register for the full meeting. We're going to meet in person, the Northeast Mid-Atlantic Forest and Water Partnership. An invitation went out to those who are on our steering committee, and hopefully it's made its way to district staff. But again, your lead for this is Annika McGurk, who's the project manager for this currently $1.2 million effort, the Northeast Mid-Atlantic Partnership for Forests and Water. And I put the fact sheet, the 2-page fact sheet in the chat earlier. And Bruni, I'll reach out to you. I did want to talk about the source water protection 10% priority areas. And I was curious if the forestry RCPP is incorporating that. So we can talk offline, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks. I have to run. I apologize.
Isaac?
Hi, everyone. This is my first one of these meetings, so I just wanted to introduce myself very briefly. I'm the new program director for Food, Climate, Environment at the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. So we work with DEM and with conservation districts and some others on a lot of this stuff. As a little bit of background about myself, I worked in New Jersey for the New Jersey Composting Council, working with NRCS down there on projects including a Manure Link website, which is something I would maybe encourage folks to look here, which was connecting basically people who had manure and those who maybe wanted to compost it or use it in their fields. And so that's now available for anyone who basically wants to use it. Yeah, we're working on a wasted food solutions action plan where we're working on finding different solutions for different practices for managing shell waste. And so I look forward to partnering with people on all the different ways that we can make our food system more sustainable. So thanks for the time to introduce myself.
Anybody else?
Matt's got his hand up.
I do. I was going to keep quiet, but I've realized as I was listening to folks speak that Southside Community Land Trust is fortunate enough to have been awarded an NRCS equity and conservation grant. And with that grant, we are able to hire a conservation associate to work with me and others on staff to really ramp up our ability to outreach on conservation programs to historically underserved producers. So I look forward in the next year, 2, 3 years to having this staff person meeting you all, interacting with your agencies, and getting to know the system because that's our key deficit as I work with underserved producers. Folks in our communities don't know about NRCS, don't know what programs are available to them on the federal and the state level to support their operations and to address resource concerns that inevitably come up. So this new position will start next week, and I'm excited to kind of bring them around and hopefully introduce them to as many people as I can in this community. Thanks.
Anyone else I see?
I think Matt Tracy.
Oh, hand down.
Eric, do you have anything you want to?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much, Jermaine. I'm great. Thanks. Appreciate being on board. Listen to the presentations.
Okay, do we have any questions or advice for anybody?
Jermaine, Gina Fuller is on the call now. Maybe she could give us an update on the Southern Local Working Group meeting.
Okay, Gina, do you have an update?
I'm here trying to find my microphone. All I really have for an update is that we did have the meeting, and we had a pretty good turnout up in Exeter for that. And most of the discussions that day were around flooding, so I think a lot of the work we're doing with the PL 566 will address some of the concerns that came up at that particular meeting. That's all I have.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing that there's no more questions or comments or advice on no one, I guess we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you guys for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jermaine.